Well, how about the 223 Remington rifle and cartridge as one do-it-all option for hunters? And what about shooting slightly uphill as I do on my range? Is that going to change my point of impact for general purpose hunting? Well, you might be surprised. We're going to answer those questions and a whole bunch more on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. And we are so glad to have you folks. As usual, we are going to start off with some questions from our patrons, but before we even get into that, I'd like to say that our sponsor for this episode, Knives of Alaska. These guys know the wilderness. They know the knives needed in the wilderness. Knives of Alaska was started by a master guide in Alaska, and they make some really handy knives like this little one I'm holding up, a folding hunter, that I think is just the right size for field dressing your deer. You might want to check out Knives of Alaska, and especially this little hunter folding lightweight knife, just the kind I like to carry in the field. All right, a lot of people have some questions about my shooting range, and I'm slightly uphill. And when I shoot uphill to zero my rifles, isn't that going to mess up all of my trajectories? Not really, guys, because it's so minimal. The angle at which I am aiming uphill is not perfectly level. It would be ideal if it were, but when I run the numbers on a ballistics calculator, it shows that the difference is so minimal that I can ignore it. Unless I were trying to do precision shooting out to, say, 1,000 yards or more, it's not making a difference in the practical field use for hunting rifles. But ideally, I would be shooting on a perfectly flat range, as probably we all should. But don't freak out if you've got a slight angle up or down while you're zeroing your rifle. It's not going to make an appreciable difference. But Combat says, Ron, I have been skipping through the shooting scenes of this recent video, and your rifle isn't in the same position on the rest, and that varies greatly from shot to shot. Yeah, that's a good point for precision shooting. Bench rest shooters make it a point to always put their rifle in the exact same position on the bags, whatever they're using. Because it can make a tiny difference, but for zeroing your hunting rifle or checking it out for accuracy with the loads that you've built or the factory ammunition you're using, not that big of a deal, but still something nice to notice. I always appreciate you sticklers for precision. You keep me on the straight and narrow, or at least you try to. Now here's a guy talking again about uphill. Yeah, I think I've addressed that already, Ed. You don't really need to freak out about that little bit of an angle. Now, Paul, talking about a video, The Best Hunting Rifle Might Surprise You. That video is getting a good response from Paul, and he says, the Falling Block rifle was actually produced by Winchester and Browning in the late 1890s, and Ruger has been producing the Falling Block since the 1960s. I think you need to look at your arms history way better than you have been, and always triple check or more on all of your information. Well, I appreciate that, Paul, but I think you need to go back a little further yourself. You are correct that Ruger began producing the number 10 Falling Block single-shot rifle in 1964. It was a surprise hit, too, because back then everybody was going to autoloaders, and pump actions were big, and lever actions were still big, and the bolts were coming on strong. But boy, Ruger was right. There were just a lot of people who appreciated the old Falling Block. And when I say old, we're going back further than that Winchester Browning you mentioned. It wasn't in the late 1890s. Browning invented it, created it, built the first few, he and his brother, in a shop here in Utah, or down the road in Utah. And it was so effective and popular that Winchester heard about it, and the president of Winchester, I guess he was the son-in-law of Winchester, Oliver Winchester, he came out to find out who was building this rifle, and he bought the patent essentially to it, so it became the Winchester 1885. But Browning was building them as far back as 1878, and that wasn't even the first Falling Block rifle, because in 1872, Farquharson, a Scotsman, invented the famous Farquharson Falling Block single-shot rifle used by Selous in Africa and many others. And prior to that, there was the Sharps rifle. And Christian Sharps made the first Sharps Falling Block rifle around 1848. And by the 1850s, they were producing some pretty good modified versions of it. And the Sharps rifles were used by the Union troops in the Civil War. And I think that's where the word sharpshooter came from. They were shooting sharps. And of course, they became the famous Buffalo rifle in the 1870s. But prior to that, there were falling block rifles. The first one that I ever heard of was built or patented by a Belgian gun designer. And I think that was around 1838. And then there was a Frenchman who had some similar patent in the 1840s. So it was a long development, this evolution of the falling block rifle. But thanks for pointing that out. Most people don't know all that much about falling blocks. They're just not all that popular. One of my favorite actions, but they're single shots, and a lot of folks want more than one shot. But you get to a certain stage in life, in your hunting life, I think, when you're just a little more concerned about having a perfect hunt and holding back and waiting for that perfect shot, in which case you only need one shot. So falling block rifles are really fun, and they're really strong. Now, Paul isn't done with me yet here. He's got another bone to pick with me. He says, oh my gosh, he's going out in left field here with some auto loaders and the 5.56 and the 222 Remington and the 223, and now it's a 7.62 51 NATO. And now he says the military is moving back to the 30 caliber class, but they're not. They went with the 277. Better known to the civilian market as a 277 Fury. The military is actually calling it in 6.8 by 51 millimeter common cartridge. Just kind of an unusual title for a military round. But yeah, things are changing, always evolving. And here's another one. M444 says it looks like you're shooting uphill. Does that change your point of impact relative to the zero and shooting level? Not enough to bother with. Here's a patron, Ed. Having some questions about the 300 PRC and the 300 Win Mag, and I think we answered this question or a similar one recently, but let's tackle it again. Hey Ron, I'm looking to buy a 300 Magnum for only target shooting, and our nearby range has a maximum of 600 yards, but on the desert I can go to 1,100 yards. I can't decide, should I get the 300 Win Mag or the 300 PRC? Well, Ed, if you're strictly wanting it for target shooting, go with the PRC. And that would apply to anybody with any PRC option. 7, 6.5. The PRCs were designed for precision target shooting. They make great hunting rifles as well, but what you gain from those is turnkey. You buy the rifle, you buy the ammo, and you're ready for long-range shooting. Whereas with the 300 Win Mag, 7 Rem Mag, etc., you need to pretty much tailor those rounds using the new high BC long target tile bullets. You're not going to find those in factory loads that much. They're usually loaded up for hunting bullets. So yeah, for targets, go with the PRC. All right, Stir Fry and I have been talking on Patreon quite a bit lately. Interesting gentleman who had a bad experience with an expensive rifle. I don't know that I want to drop the name on it. You can go to his channel. I think it's Stir Fry. But he was working and working. He just did a heck of a job figuring out or trying to figure out why this rifle wouldn't shoot. He'd done a lot of research and picked what he thought would be a really accurate rifle that had that famous 3-shot sub-MOA guarantee and all that good stuff, and he was not getting it. Sent it back to the company, and they sent a target back showing a beautiful tight group well under MOA. But they shot it while waiting for the barrel to completely cool. I think it was more than 10 or 15 minutes between shots. And that proved that it could shoot a sub-MOA 3-shot group. But that didn't impress somebody who wants to perhaps shoot an elk and then shoot him 2 more times if you needed to. You don't have 10 minutes to wait. So Stir Fry was working with that and writing back and forth and asking me what I thought. And then he asked in his latest letter, he is interested in rechambering, and he wants to know if that will improve accuracy, and he's curious about the process of rechambering a barrel. And he says, since I've already ordered another 300 PRC rifle, I thought that maybe I would just rechamber this Brand X rifle, but I don't know what chamberings are compatible. So I responded to Stir Fry a couple of times. We went around about it, and I said, I think you're getting rechambering confused with rebarreling your rifle. Why would someone want to rechamber a barrel that doesn't shoot? It wouldn't make any difference if it was shooting a 300 PRC or a 300 Win Mag or a 3378 Weatherby or anything else. The barrel's bad, not necessarily the chamber. So I said, as long as you understand that, I suggest you do not rechamber that barrel to anything, because it just doesn't seem to be a barrel that will shoot warm at all. And I think he understands it now, but this is kind of a common issue with a lot of folks getting into hunting and shooting and stuff, is that rebarreling and rechambering are not the same thing. I would rechamber a barrel that shot well, but I just wanted a more powerful cartridge or something different. Then you can rechamber. Otherwise, rebarrel. And when you rebarrel, you can pretty much chamber that barrel for any cartridge that will fit that rifle's action. In other words, the length of the bolt throw to handle the cartridge length, and the diameter of the bolt face to handle the head of the cartridge, or the rim size. And there's usually quite a variety that fit within those. All right, now Mike is another patron, and he said, I just read your last Patreon newsletter, and I really appreciate it that you include your successes and your failures in your videos. Well, that's easy to include my failures. It helps to keep me from becoming discouraged. If Ron Spomer makes mistakes as he works through problems, or he misses a shot, well, then it's okay if I do too. I only listen to experts who talk about their failures as well as their successes. Well, I appreciate that, Mike. And I don't know if I make more or fewer mistakes than everybody else out there on YouTube, but it is, I think, one of the issues with YouTube is that, of course, someone with a channel can just keep filming and trying until he gets everything just right, and then throw away all the mistakes and pretend like I'm the master. Well, I'm no master. I'm not going to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. If you ever bump into me in real life, you're going to go, oh my gosh, is this the guy I was listening to? But I appreciate that, Mike, and I will continue to struggle through and show you the mistakes that I make, and most of my friends make as well. We're all human here. Wish I were an expert, but this is as close as I can get. Now, Russell, what have you have to say here, Russell? Ron, I meant to ask you about your response that you gave me earlier about which two centerfire rifle chamberings you would pick if you could only have two. And I'm curious why you went with a 223 Remington. I am seriously considering getting one of those, and it'll probably be the only one that I own, unless I have a particular job that I need for another one. So I guess another follow-up to that question is, what platform would you choose and what barrel length? Well, I wrote back, I said, hey, Russell, I chose the 223 of the two because it's ubiquitous, it's inexpensive, no recoil, is adequate for small game all the way up to deer and pronghorn-sized animals. It would most likely be my predator, varmint, and plinking training rifle, mainly. And I'd choose a traditional bolt-action sporter weight with a 22-inch barrel, fancy walnut stock, just because I love those. But I would pillar bed the action and float the barrel. And Russell writes back again. He says, so you think that an AR platform is not necessary to get the full enjoyment out of a 223? And to that question, I would say, Russell, that just depends on the individual shooter. Some people love the AR platforms. They love autoloaders and everything about them. I just prefer the bolt action. And part of that, I think, is that I've never enjoyed throwing my brass away. It's just shoot once, pick up your brass. In fact, I'm guilty of that big mistake in the hunting fields of shooting a deer and then, okay, I got him, bending over and finding my brass and risking that deer getting up and running off. I've learned the hard way not to do that, but it's just built into me since I was a kid to save that brass and reload it. And then Russell asks another question. Speaking of that 223, what do you think the range would be for hunting pronghorn? All right, now the range on that, Russell, you're looking at not just the ability of the bullet to get there, accurate shooting. 223s are really, really accurate, but of course you are starting with a fairly light bullet, and you've got some wind deflection issues with them because they don't all have really high BCs unless you're going with something over 60 grains that's designed for it. They're still not that good in the wind. So given the energy levels of that 223, not that energy is going to make all the difference, but to keep your energies up there a little bit, I would say 250, perhaps 300 yards. But you've got to put that bullet in the right place. Anytime you're shooting something light like a 223 or a 222, or sometimes even down to or up to a 243 Winchester, you really need to make precision shots. Tight behind the shoulder, third of the way down, you're going to hit the top of the heart or the heart itself or the lungs just above it to either side. That's a good precision shot that does not require a lot of bullet mass and energy to do the job. So just because I picked a 223 doesn't mean I'm thinking it's the best for big game hunting. It's obviously not. It just sort of squeaks in there. It's really ideal for, well, the reason I would want a 22 centerfire, which is the plinking and the target shooting at lower recoil and less expense and all. And of course, it's a great predator hunting rifle if you need to take care of a coyote problem or anything like that. But then when Russell and I were going back and forth on this, the other one I picked was the 7 Rem Mag. And I think anyone who's listened to a lot of my broadcasts before understands that I pretty much think that 7 Rem Mag is kind of the ultimate all-around do-everything cartridge. Not too powerful, not too weak, flat enough, fast enough, without being over the top, just general all-around, covers the waterfront kind of a cartridge. And to that, Russell wrote, I guess you must think that the 7 Rem Mag covers a big variety of needs, and anything else in between that and the 223, really you don't even need it. And yeah, you don't need it, but boy, you sure could want it and get some enjoyment with any number of 24s and 25s and 26s and 27s and other 28s. But he suggests that I put a video about the 7 Rem Mag up being my favorite, and then the 7 PRC people would be upset when they hear that the 7 Remington Magnum is good enough. Well, I suppose they would be, but I find what happens whenever I champion a particular cartridge is that anyone who champions something similar or better that they think is better, their preferred, they're upset with me, but that's just the way this whole business works. You get your favorites, you get your pets. It's kind of like picking one baseball team over another. It doesn't matter if they're the best or not the best or anything else. It's your team, by golly. And if that's your cartridge, you don't want to hear any nasty stuff about it. All right, so we have some good interchanges and exchanges on Patreon with folks, and we always enjoy that. They help me out, and I hope sometimes I'm giving them some good information as well. Yeah, that sounds good. Now, what's this? Did I do this one already? What about these? Good. Looks like I get to swing over to the big surprises the team has pulled together. Team Betsy. What have you come up with this time, my dear? She wants me to finish off a couple that I didn't answer the last time when we went long. So this is from... did that one. Connor, it looks like, from Florida. Hey, I'm Connor here. I'm 26 years old. A silly little story and a question I have for you. I am a big fan of the 270 Winchester cartridge, and I have taken several hogs with it, and I was planning on taking it for my first whitetail buck hunt. But my gun was in the shop, getting the barrel threaded, so I ended up taking my 6.5 Creedmoor instead. Ultimately, I regretted it, because I shot an 8-point buck, and he was quartering away a little bit, so when it hit the vitals, it hit the interior shoulder and did not exit. Leaving me with a 0 blood trail for tracking. My grandfather gives me a hard time for using a small bullet because he hunts with the 300 Remington Ultra Magnum. Yeah, a little overkill, I know. Because he hunts for the trophy, not so much for the meat. So he's not worried about meat damage. My question is, I told him I didn't have my 270 to bring along on that hunt because it was getting worked on. And he still gave me a hard time saying that cartridge is... the 6.5 Creedmoor is not enough to drop a trophy-sized buck, or at least exit through a shoulder to leave a blood trail. In your opinion, do you believe an average 130 to 150 grain 270 can pass through vitals and a shoulder and still exit? Or should I upgrade to a larger caliber such as a 300 Win Mag or something of that nature? Thank you for reading my long story. Hey, that's all right, Connor. Your long story is a pretty common one. And I can't exactly agree with your grandfather on this one. Yeah, I know, you can never go too big. There's no such thing as too dead, right? We've all heard that. But come on, a 270 not being enough for deer, or even a 6.5 Creedmoor. The issue you had with that shot sounds to me like the famous between the shoulder and the chest. The shoulders of a deer or an elk, any ungulate, are not bone-to-bone attached to the rib cage. Muscular attachment. So, let me think. You can, and I have done this, put a bullet between the shoulder and the rib cage and just hit meat. So it's just a flesh wound, essentially. Can be a mild flesh wound or a pretty nasty one, but I've shot deer there and had them continue running. You don't even really ruin their ability to run. It's just not a lot of functional stuff there. And I've had bullets at those steep angles follow the rib line like they're the bow of a ship, and they just slide around there. The solution for that, of course, is to get a little better angle. The other solution is a harder bullet that's less prone to that kind. But boy, I've even had all copper bullets do that slide around thing. Once on a moose, which wasn't real surprising. So it's just kind of a shot you want to avoid. I don't think it would have made any difference if you had a 270 or even that 300 drum. I've seen it with some pretty big cartridges and bullets. But that said, the 6.5 Creedmoor is well proven to be effective on taking deer-sized animals. I mean, my gosh, it is the same, pretty much the same ballistic performance as a 6.5 by 55 Swede that people crow about and love, and it's been around since the 1890s, taking all kinds of game around the world. And there have been plenty of 6.5s shooting at lower velocities than the Creedmoor, used in Africa to take huge animals over there, including elephants with brain shots. So if the right bullet on a 6.5 Mannlicher Schonauer, which was used by Bell to take about 300 elephants, if that bullet can reach the brain of a big bull elephant, I don't see why a Creedmoor shouldn't, with the right bullet, be able to take a whitetail. So that's kind of my take on it. But hey, if you want to hunt deer with a 300 Win Mag, go ahead. I've taken several with it, and it is more than is necessary, but it's never less than is necessary. All right, here's somebody from South Africa. I don't have a name for this gentleman. It says, I'm a South African. I have been following you on YouTube for some time. I enjoy your video, and especially the one on a recent South African hunt with your new rifle. The problem you have experienced with barrel fouling, it's a topic you have covered several times in previous videos, and that triggered me to share my experience. Some background about myself. My hunting and shooting journey started in 1970, and I started hand loading in 1990. I have acted as a guide for hunters. I've mentored quite a few young people. I've been involved in F-class target shooting for about 4 years. Although I have handled and shot several calibers and rifles during my journey, I have only owned 3. A 22 long rifle, a 30-06, and a 375 H&H. Sounds like you've got the waterfront nicely covered there, partner. My experience confirms your observation and experiences that you must clean your barrel down to steel when you change from copper or to copper from a lead bore bullet and vice versa. It is what it is. I understand, and there's been some questions about changing between various lead core bullets, that there are some uncertainties about the need to do this deep cleaning between changes. Well, I have found that if your barrel is not heavily fouled and it's relatively clean, you could change between lead core bullet brands and styles, provided that you shoot between 3 to 6 shots with the new lead core bullet, allowing it to settle in, so to speak. I do not have a scientific explanation for this, but it's been my experience. For some reason, stainless steel barrels are more lenient than carbon-based barrels and require less fouling shots than the carbon barrels. Sometimes only 1 shot will do the trick. When I acted as a guide, we had a rule that you only load up for the hunt with the cartridges you used for sighting your rifle. If you wanted to change to a different weight or brand of cartridges and bullets, back to the shooting range. We would also ask you to clean your barrel if you wanted to change from lead core to copper bullets. I appreciate that most experienced shooters and hunters would know this, but we have found that some hunters would arrive on the hunting concession with boxes of various kinds of ammunition and weights of bullets, interchanging them at will, resulting in wounded animals. Well, no surprise there, sir. So, Ron, thank you for your work and sharing with us. I find it very informative and educational, even at my age and level of experience. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your experience, but I do want to clarify a couple of things here. You're always mentioning lead core bullets and needing to change from a lead core bullet clean your barrel to go to a copper bullet. I have not found it consistently the other way around, but I think you're probably right on one type of bullet shooting best after you've done fouling with your new load. So if you're shooting, say, 150 grain a lead core gilding metal jacketed bullet from Winchester, and then you switch to one from Federal or Remington or anyone else, shoot 3 to 6 and then expect your best accuracy after you've laid down the new fouling. That seems to be it. And it's not lead core bullets that are making the difference. It's the gilding metal jacket around those bullets. That's what's lying on the surface of your bore. That's fouling the lands and conflicting somehow with the copper. Copper is generally softer, and that may be the issue. You've got a harder surface, a softer surface, and the two don't like each other. I don't know, but it's pretty consistent. So clean down to bare metal if you expect to get superior accuracy out of your copper bullets. Once you've fired those copper bullets through the barrel and it's always fouled with those, you can go a long, long time before your accuracy starts to suffer. And with that, there is no 20 rounds or 50 rounds or 100 rounds. Every barrel is different. Some of them will remain accurate for 200 rounds. Some will start to give it up after as few as 20 or even 10. I've had some really crazy ones that would give it up at 10 rounds, which for hunting is not a big deal. You generally, gosh, I've gone through hunting seasons and taken half a dozen animals with fewer than 10 shots. But if you're shooting a lot, got to pay attention to that. All right, let's see what else Betsy has found for us here. Sterling. Ron, I'm a recent patron. Oh, thank you. Thanks for supporting us there, Sterling. I couldn't figure out how to send you a question on Patreon, so I thought I'd send it to your website. Well, that's great. I hope you figure Patreon out. It's fairly simple once you get it all figured out. But hey, if you're like me, you get on one of these new programs and it's like, oh, now what? Everything's in sign language. Nobody ever explains it in English anymore. So you've got to look at this little signal and that little squiggle diggle and figure out which one you should click to have something happen. I think it's crazy. Going back to the dark ages here. Sign language. Me grog. Sterling continues, I am interested to hear your take on how a rifle barrel's precision can be affected by temperature, especially with hotter cartridges like 300 PRC. Yeah, temperature changes the barrel's structure, not really the structure, but the response of the crystalline structure of the steel. It gets hotter, it expands, and that's going to change how the bullet is reacting with the rifling. As it gets colder, it contracts, so there are differences in the vibrations. And this is why several years ago they came up with cryogenic barrel treatments. Freezing the barrel, super, super, super cold barrel that somehow realigns the crystal structure of the steel so that you don't get them sort of fighting one another and ending up with a hot barrel wandering. It's typically what happens. Your barrel gets hotter, the groups start to fly because your barrel's stretching and wandering and expanding and different things. And that's why people are interested, especially target shooters, where they have to run a string. They want a heavier barrel because they tend to remain cooler longer. And they want a heavier barrel because it just tends to vibrate less, oscillates less. I mean, it's hard to believe, but when you fire a bullet down a barrel, that barrel actually oscillates and whips around kind of like a wet noodle, like a wet spaghetti noodle. I know it's steel, it's hard, you can't bend it, but by golly, it's expanding and contracting and wiggling around, and crazy vibrations that high speed cameras have shown. And that's what's changing your precision or your consistency, your accuracy. That's why we have to have ammunition that is built precisely so that it creates the same vibrations each time. The bullets have to weigh the same. They have to be balanced. The powder charges have to be the same. The primers have to give as much ignition heat every time, and on it goes. There's all these tiny little variables that can change how your barrel vibrates. Ideally, if you could shoot with it wouldn't vibrate at all, you should be really accurate every time. But it's just part of the game. Okay, let's see. Up in Colorado, we have Garrett. Ron, I was curious if you have heard or seen a suppressor have a catastrophic failure. Ooh, this should be interesting. I was at the range today, and my suppressor brand name omitted because this is a very reputable brand and I believe that this was a fluke, but it came apart when I took my 5th shot. A friend who was with me said that he saw the parts skipping down the range past the 100-yard line. I was unable to locate any such pieces to inspect them. I'm shooting a 7PRC through a 30 caliber suppressor. All I can think is that the baffles separated from the body and pushed everything down range. There are only the first 2 baffles left. If this is from a baffle strike or the pressure, I don't know. I hope that the manufacturer will cover it with their warranty, but any ideas or discussions would be appreciated. I can provide photos if you'd like them. Oh boy, Garrett, I've got to tell you, I am not that experienced with suppressors. I've never had a failure with one. I've enjoyed them. I usually get more accuracy with one when I put it on a particular rifle. I've taken game with it in Africa with several different rifles. I've done some target shooting with several. I've used them on autoloaders as well as bolt actions. And I have heard of failures, especially bullet strikes, but exactly what's happening, I do not know. So all you folks out there with a lot of experience with suppressors, what do you guess was going on here? My guess would be that your bullet was so unstable that it hit something inside. So that just seems to make the most sense, especially when you had a 30 caliber and you're shooting a 7, fairly close. So if your particular bullet was a little unbalanced, maybe a little bit too long for your twist rate, so it's coming out with a lot of yaw. The nose might have spun out far enough to hit one of the baffles, and that began the chain reaction. That would be my guess, but I surely don't know. Now, the good news is, just last week, I interviewed an expert on suppressors. He's an engineer. He designs them. He builds them for a company that sells lots of different ones, and he just filled me in on all kinds of great information on suppressors and what we as hunters and shooters should look for when we're shopping for suppressors. So stay tuned for that. Should be coming up fairly soon. That will be on Ron Spomer Outdoors' regular YouTube channel, where we can show cutaways to show what's inside one of those mufflers. They're gun mufflers. They were invented by the same guy who invented the car muffler. Ken from Colorado. Boom, a couple of Colorado guys there. Hi, Ron. I recently purchased a new rifle and scope. Well, congratulations. I hope you're having fun with those. I had the scope mounted and bore sighted in the store. Sometimes that can work. Sometimes that can get you into trouble. Let's see where it went for Kent. While discussing sighting in the rifle, the dealer said something that confused me and it gave me pause. I went online to verify his shared technique, and I found your video and have now watched it twice. His recommended technique was the same as yours. That is, moving the scope crosshairs to the point of impact on the paper. In other words, if I shot high 1 inch and right 1 inch, your technique is to move the crosshairs up an inch and right an inch. This is completely opposite what I've been doing for years. I would have moved the crosshairs down an inch and left an inch to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I searched for and I watched 2 additional videos on sighting in rifles, and both of those I watched made the corrections as I would have done, down an inch and left an inch. Of these methods, one of these methods must be wrong. Which one? Thanks, Ron. Actually, they're not wrong. You're just getting a little confused by scope movements. When you dial down on your scope, it's actually moving up. Sounds crazy, but it's the way it works. So you're confusing the where should I dial on my scope versus where should I move my crosshair. If you don't even look at the scope and just watch the crosshair on the target without moving the rifle, and you've got it pointing at the same bullseye you aimed at when your shot went an inch high and an inch right, you just start turning and watch the reticle go up and over, turning obviously the horizontal as well as the vertical. And when you do that, you'll see, oh, now my crosshair is pointing to the bullet. What does that tell me? It tells me the crosshair is now looking at the same place that the barrel put the bullet. So you're zeroed. Now, if you want to look at the scope and say, oh, up and down, things are backwards. You have to turn it the other way so that the scope aims to move the barrel to where the bullet's going. So they're both doing the same thing. You're just a little confused. And I understand it. I've been confused about it for years, and I still get confused from time to time. I mean, wait a minute again. How does this work? But the easiest way is to just watch that reticle. Watch it while you're turning. Okay. Good one, Kent. Thanks for bringing that up. That might help a lot of folks who are confused with things like that. Alex from California. Ron, I love your YouTube channel and podcasts. I watch and listen to them every chance I get. Well, thanks so much, Alex. We really appreciate that. I am preparing for my first big game trip cow elk, and I'm working up a load for my Tang Safety Ruger M77 in 270 Winchester. I wonder if that's my old rifle. That was my first elk hunting rifle. I got it in 1976, centennial year. Ooh, that was a big year. I was fresh out of college, and my brother and a buddy and I launched our first big adventure to the mountains. We went from South Dakota to Montana and spent the entire hunting season. I think we left on September 1st, and we didn't get home until the end of November or early December. And we hunted and fished everything. We had licenses for everything that moved. And we camped out and we froze our butts off, and we just had a wild time. Didn't shoot an elk. Missed that one a few times at a ridiculous range. Didn't have range finders in those days. And up in the mountains, up and down, I'm going, I don't know how far away that is. It's anybody's guess. Oh boy. But at any rate, that was a great rifle. That thing would shoot sub-MOA. Factory rifle. I did hand loads, of course, but factory rifle, and was it heavy? Oh my gosh. Oh, that thing weighed in excess of 10 pounds. I was in my 20s, so we'll just eat more beans and keep going, eh? Anyway, back to you now. You've got your wonderful rifle here. I have a variety of lead, 150 grain partition, 140 grain interlock, monometal, 110 grain barns, 140 grain barns, 133 grain shock hammer, bullets. And I wanted some help on the priority of load testing, cleaning between loads, etc. As I remember you were saying that monometal bullets need a few sacrificial rounds through them before they'll group well. It's more than that. We'll get to it. I'm wondering if that's the same for shooting lead after monometal bullets, or if it'd be better to clean the bore in between all of them. Also, I understand shot placement is key, but would you recommend that I focus on one bullet over another? Regards, Alex. Well, good questions, Alex. Really good. And yeah, you're on the right track, but you're just a little bit confused yet. Okay, as for the bullets, the partition bullet, proven since 1948. Great bullet. Not the high BCs of modern bullets, but it could sure do the job when it gets there. And 150 grain from a 270 Winchester, you're talking dead elk. Now, 140 grain interlock, I've used that successfully. I would go with chest shots broadside with that one, but I've used that to take elk. Now, your monometal bullets, 110 grain barns can do it, but I would lean towards that 140 grain. You're always going to have a little bit lighter weight in those copper bullets because they do not have the density, the specific gravity of lead. So to get the same length that your rifle can stabilize, you can't go past that length or you're unstable, so the weight ends up being a little bit lighter. But that means you can drive them faster to kind of make up for it. And because they don't lose mass when they enter, they generally will weigh 90 to 100% of their original mass. That helps them retain momentum and penetrate really, really well. So 140 grain Barnes bullet is easily the equivalent of the 150 grain partition, and probably 160 grain partition if there is one. And then pretty much the same with that shock hammer. The hammer bullets, all copper, but their petals are designed to break off and work much like the fragmenting parts of a traditional bullet. Pieces of lead and jacket going here and there and creating more damage beyond the initial wound channel of that bullet. So they're all good options, and I think you'll have great success with any of those. As far as the load testing and cleaning, you don't have to clean between different gilding metal jacketed bullets. Most people confuse it and say lead core. Yeah, there's a lead core, but that's not what's touching the rifle's barrel. The lands and grooves are being touched by the jacket material, and that's where the problem comes in, as I mentioned earlier in this show. So, if you're shooting a gilding metal traditional jacketed lead core bullet, you need to be concerned about the gilding metal fouling in the barrel messing up your coppers. So, clean all of the gilding metal fouling out of your barrel right down to bare steel before you start testing your copper bullets for accuracy. And once you're testing your copper bullets for accuracy, generally switching between the Barnes and the shock hammers and the Badlands Precisions and the Cutting Edge and all the rest of those, you generally don't have to. You're sticking with copper. Now, some of these have some alloy in them, and a lot of them are secret. They won't tell you, like hammer bullet guys. They got this special kind of alloy that makes their bullets just perform. And if they get away from that, they start to lose accuracy. And if they stick with it, boy, they get superior accuracy. And CX bullets from Hornady have a little more zinc in them, I believe, so they're getting closer towards the gilding metal. They may affect precision, so the safest route is to always clean down the bare metal when switching copper bullets. And then you're going to be able to find out really how accurate they are. Once you have fouled your barrel with those copper bullets and you keep shooting that same bullet, you should be fine. Now, there is a trick to cleaning down the bare metal. Most people never see the inside of the barrels other than you peek in them and go, ooh, that's nice and shiny, it must be clean. You're not going to see the copper on there unless it's right at the muzzle and really, really heavy. But if you get a bore scope that has a right angle viewer so that you are looking, you're like literally living in the bore and looking right at it like this, sticking your nose right against the rifling. That's what you can do with a bore scope. I have had a Hawkeye bore scope from Gradient Lens for, gosh, probably 20 years. Great tool, expensive. These days there's a much, much less expensive thing out there that works with your phone, and you get to see the image on the screen. You don't get in there with the Hawkeye. It's like having a microscope, and you're actually looking right at it. And you will see copper fouling in the grooves, on the lands. Oh my gosh, you're going to see all kinds of stuff. And you go, holy mackerel, had no idea. I'll clean a barrel the traditional way and go, wow, it must really be clean. It's shiny. I'll put that bore scope in there and I go, oh my gosh, I'm going to be here another hour. Because sometimes it takes a long time to get that copper fouling out, gilding metal fouling. You're going to see it as that color on your, mostly on the lands. But you can use, of course, the copper remover solvent. It'll do gilding metal jacketed bullets as well as copper. And they come out with a blue color on them. So you don't really need to see it as long as you're using enough of that stuff and pushing it out, and you no longer have blue color on your patches. I will get a lot of that copper solvent in the barrel, follow the directions on the bottle. There's lots of different ones. They all seem to work pretty darn well. And let it soak for 5 to 10 minutes, whatever they recommend, and then push a nice white patch through there, and it comes out dark blue. Wow. Do it again, comes out blue. Do it again, starting to get a little paler blue, but that might last for 20 of them. Sometimes 10 will do it, but sometimes it takes 30. So it takes a while, but that's a way that you can figure out. You've got all the copper out. No more blue on your patches. And then you're going to be safe to shoot. So, yes, it's a lot of work. This is why I tend to pick a bullet, stick with it, and develop a load that works for me, and I don't have to do all that cleaning in between. Shot placement, would you recommend I focus on one bullet? Yeah, focus on one bullet. But as I said earlier, all of those will work with perhaps the 110 grain, but even that 110 grain Barnes, I think, is going to work for you on a cow elk. If you're making a good shot, put it in the right place, it's going to such high velocity, and it probably won't shoot through like the 140 would, but I expect to be able to get it. But I lean to the 140 Barnes or the 133 shock hammer. And, of course, that partition, if that's shooting the most accurately for you and you like that one, that'll certainly do the job too. I found that partitions generally will lose 50 to 60% of their mass. There's a lot of nose lead up there that comes off like on a traditional bullet, and then the nose or the shank lead is kind of locked in. That'll stay and continue your momentum. All right, from Tennessee, Matt. Hello, Ron from East Tennessee. I really enjoy the content. I'm learning a lot from your videos. I am looking into getting into the suppressor game, and I'm wondering if I add one to the gun that I currently have, sighted in on a specific round of ammo, will the suppressor accept the same load, or would I more likely have to develop a new load? Not sure how this affects or changes accuracy. Thanks again. Always look forward to your knowledge. Well, thank you, Matt, and in my experience, you will not need to change. It rarely will open up your groups a little bit. Usually suppressors tighten up your groups. And we've got an explanation coming from an engineer who designs these in an upcoming broadcast. He'll tell you all about it. It's really pretty cool. It has to do with essentially extending the length of your barrel, even though the suppressor is a larger diameter than your barrel to accommodate the bullet. It will have an effect on stabilizing that bullet a bit more because you don't get the sudden burst of gases that come out of the muzzle at super high velocity that can disrupt the bullet. they are funneled into those baffles inside of the can and slowed down so the bullet has less disturbance from its own powering gases behind it. It's pretty cool. So I would expect to get improved accuracy with a suppressor. Now, all of these questions about elk and elk hunting reminded me that recently I had a chance to interview an elk guide. Great guy, a local kid. I call him a kid because he could probably be my son, if not grandson. He's young. He's probably in his 30s, but he's really successful. He's got a great attitude. I really like this kid. Let's just call him Tate because that's who he is. At any rate, Tate stopped by, and I said, hey, you want to do a quick little interview? Because he's got this cool hunting camp coming up for elk. He is going to teach people how to hunt elk, and he's got a wonderful philosophy. He really likes ordinary hunters like us. He says he's been working for different outfitters, including himself over the years, and he's worked at these high-dollar places where you spend like $30,000, $40,000 for an elk hunt. And he said, that's great. You get great tips and all the rest of it, but he just really likes the enthusiasm that he gets from ordinary guys who have struggled to save enough money for maybe a $4,000 elk hunt. And they hunt hard, and they really appreciate the opportunity, and they don't do that, well, gee, I was expecting a bigger one for $30,000. They just say, man, what a hunt, if they get something or they don't. So we are going to listen to that interview, put it right up here. Let's just go right now to Tate and hear what he has to say about this elk training school. Hey, everyone, I get a lot of questions from folks about elk hunting. They want to come out. Who doesn't want that great Western elk hunt for the first time? But, oh my gosh, it can be really expensive if you hire a full guided camp. But if you come out on your own, where do you start? If you haven't lived in the West and you don't know elk, what do you do? Well, an elk outfitter just showed up, my friend Tate Bradfield, and he has got something exciting to announce, a new school for elk hunters. Tate, what's this all about?
Yeah, so I just decided that I didn't like charging guys exorbitant amounts of money for
I'll go for free.
but for really marginal elk hunts on public land that are very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And I love teaching people. I love teaching the outdoors, and so what I did is I created my outfitting business. I transferred it into like you say, a school to a mentor program to help people become proficient on their own for elk hunting and Western hunting in general, so that they don't have to spend exorbitant amounts of money, and that they can just go out and kind of, rather than giving them a fish, I'm just going to teach them how to do it on their own.
So you have a school.
Yep.
The students show up, pay you a little bit of money, and you teach them how to hunt elk.
Yep. It's about, like an eighth of the cost of most guided hunts now. So,
but it's not an actual hunt, is it?
No. Well, I do have some that are actual hunts, but the ones that are coming up that I have availability for are, it's actually with Joseph Von Benedict from the Backcountry Hunting Podcast. He's going to be one of the instructors on it. And that one, you don't have a tag in your pocket, but you get to learn everything about how to hunt elk at a very, very cheap cost, anywhere from $1,525 to $1,850, depending on the accommodations we have for you.
So it's full accommodations, room and board.
Yep, meals,
and
lodging,
instruction on how to hunt elk.
Yep, and Joseph in particular is going to give you instructions on, some quote unquote long range shooting, out to 500-600 yards to shoot.
No, for Joseph, 300 yards is long range.
250,
Yeah, I'll give him a benefit of the doubt. So you've got shooting instruction. What else do you have?
So we're going to talk about herd dynamics because elk herds change throughout the year. How you hunt them changes, and the rut. It's going to be very different. In the rut, you're going to have bulls with harems. Pre-rut, in August, there are some archery tags. In August, most of the bulls are going to be on their own, just starting to look for cows.
Okay.
November, post-rut, they're going to be, those bulls are going to get into little bachelor groups or be on their own in deep, dark timber where they're trying to recuperate from what they just did. So just talking about some of that in-depth type of herd dynamics and knowledge. And then we're also going to talk about elk calling techniques, how to butcher an elk so you know what you're doing.
That's good.
Yeah. So for the high altitude stuff, it is daunting for somebody even that lives in the West to learn how to hunt a new animal. Like I started hunting bears a few years ago, and it was totally new. But I knew enough about Western hunting in general that I picked it up pretty quick, and now I kill a bear pretty much every year.
A lot of it has to do with habitat and
understanding what they need, food sources, and some units in the West are very, very different from other units. If you're hunting in Idaho in the Frank Church Wilderness, low elk populations, big country, steep country versus, hunting in Nevada on almost flat ground or rolling hills and sagebrush. It's just a very different environment. And so learning how to hunt in some key environments will be transferable across multiple species generally too.
Sure.
At least to a degree.
Now, are you going to give some instruction on where to find a place to hunt? Obviously, you're talking public land, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So national forest and BLM ground. Those are two big ones.
Yeah, and so I think that a big part of this is we're going to be teaching about topographical features of how to look for the food sources based on X or just Google Earth, whatever. You're going to be able to, and you'll get better at it. It's something you have to practice. But looking at topographical features, where the aspen trees are in relation to bedding areas and water holes and things like that, we're gonna teach all about that. How to do some e-scouting, and then also how to spend your time most wisely in the field, because that's a big thing I see a lot of people kind of get wrong in their first years of Western hunting, is just not using their time wisely or just exhausting themselves too quickly.
Yeah, you've got to find these elk. It's big country, and you could walk yourself to death and never get close to an elk. So you need to either hear the elk or spot the elk. I like to glass. I'm sure you're going to focus on that.
Oh, very much. We're gonna teach you how to glass, how to find vantage points, so that you can at least have a general idea of where you want to go to while you're. When you e-scout, we're going to teach you how to have at least, 5 or 10 different areas that you can go and glass from, because odds are about half of them aren't probably going to work. So you got to have some backup plans, have some areas where you want to check out. Half of them probably won't be good, and the other half will.
Now, what about lodging, camping? You're coming all the way out here. Where are you going to stay?
Yeah, so guys will fly into Salt Lake City. It's about 2 hours. The ranch we're going to be doing this course has about 2 hours from the Salt Lake City airport. We have either cabins that you can stay in, or you can stay in wall tents. Just depends on what you want to do.
Wall tents is good. Stay in a wall tent, because that's probably what you're going to hunt in. I always, when I came out west, hunted in a nice wall tent. I would take a smaller tent and backpack out from it sometimes if I needed to find the elk. But a wall tent really gives you that. It's almost like a cabin, a little more comfort than
Very
being in a
much.
backpack tent.
Very much, yeah. I mean, I've stayed in both, and I definitely prefer the wall tent over a backpacking tent. But, if you do it right, you can be comfortable in both, and it'll teach you a little bit about the roughingness of elk hunting if you stay in that wall tent.
Get you ready for it.
Yeah, because the cabins are great, but you got a shower and you got a nice, comfy twin bed, and
You're not going to have that elk hunting.
no, you won't.
Although I did find a hot springs one time. That was nice.
It's my dream,
ultimate.
actually.
There weren't any elk there, but it was a great place to hunt.
It was a great spot to sit for a while. So as far as like accommodations, all your food, all your lodging is included with the price. You just have to make sure that you get it out there. You're going to want to bring about 4 to 6 boxes of ammunition to be able to shoot that.
Well, you're actually going to be doing shooting.
You're going to be shooting your rifle. We're going to help you understand the setup of your rifle, the capabilities of your cartridge. We're going to be shooting out to some longer ranges, 600-800 yards. But realistically, most guys shouldn't shoot past about 400 to 500 yards hunting.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be very highly focused on teaching you about your equipment and how to hone your skills.
So you're going to be getting into things like packs, what you're going to want for a pack, for bringing your elk out,
Yes.
how to butcher that elk,
Yeah,
cut him up.
we'll talk about gear. We'll talk about bullet choice. We're going to be talking about cartridge choice for elk. We're going to talk about elk shot placement, which is probably more important than cartridge, honestly. That and bullet type, so it's going to be very in depth. We're going to talk about after the shot, how to butcher animals, how to keep good. If you shoot an elk 2, 3, 4, 5 miles into the backcountry, you got to have some trips up your sleeve in order to keep that meat good.
Yeah, keep the meat in good shape and get it out.
It might take a couple of days to get it out.
Yeah, this sounds like a pretty complete course. If someone goes to this class, are they going to pretty much have the solid background information to put a hunt together for themselves?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
That's
So
the whole idea.
the whole goal of this, and I have some drop camps that they can do if they just want to, take that next step a little bit slower with a little bit of mentorship. But if they would have all the knowledge that they would need to do in order to do an elk hunt on their own. And that's the whole goal of this, is to help guys be able to have an affordable way to get into elk hunting, especially for the blue collar guys, because that's kind of what I am. I worked in a mine and in construction before I was an outfitter. And so just being able to help guys that fulfill a dream that they probably thought they'd never be able to do.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like a great school. When is it?
So the course for this year is August 18th through the 21st. It's coming up really quick, so you got to get on there and book really quick. It's processed processbasedhunter.com is what you can look at that.
What was it again?
Processbasedhunter.com.
Process-based
Yes. So
hunter.
Yep.
.com.
And I can send you a link to that.
Yeah, we'll put the link on here.
And then, so it's going to come up quick. We have quite a few spots left, but not a lot. So you got to get on it fast, or we're not, you may not get your spot. And then we will be doing again next year as well.
Can I come and audit this class?
Yes, you can. I would love that, actually.
I maybe do some videos too. What we're going to do, we're going to do videos of your school. And if they're exciting and all that, we'll put some shorts out, put some stuff on YouTube, and just see how it flies.
I would love that. I think that would be awesome, because then I can get people excited, teach them a little bit.
Yeah.
And
you're getting me excited. As a matter of fact, speaking of excitement, I'm thinking we could do Elk Week.
Oh my gosh.
I could do a series of YouTube videos on Elk Week. We'll take your instruction and we'll put it together in a video every day for a week. How do you like that, guys? Great idea. Elk Week. I love it.
I love it. We don't want to teach them everything, but we'll teach you just enough to get you excited.
Sounds like a deal. Okay. All right. Hey, thanks
for
stopping in, Tate. I really appreciate that. Hey, everybody. If you are a little bit confused about this, one more time, where will they go to find out the information?
So processbasedhunter.com, you'd fly into Salt Lake City. The actual ranch is in Idaho. It's a private ranch, state-of-the-art shooting facility.
How far away from Salt Lake Airport?
Roughly 2 hours from the airport. Yep. And we will be sending out a list, so if people want to carpool, anybody that wants to carpool, we'll send out an email. Nice. You can say if you want to have your email shared, and we'll have people carpool, so it saves a little bit of money for everybody.
How many students are you expecting in the class?
Right now we have about 20. We have about 40 spots available.
Wow.
And we're going to split that up into 3 groups so that, everybody feels like they get a little bit of one-on-one time with everything that we're going to be doing.
How many guides, teachers, instructors?
So we're going to have 3 to 5 instructors there.
Okay. So everybody ought to be taken care of pretty nicely.
Oh, yeah. We'll make sure everybody's taken care of.
All right. We'll see you all there, folks. Check it out. I think you're going to like Elk Camp, and I think we're going to like doing Elk Week, so stay tuned. Thanks, Tate. That was a great interview. If you guys are interested in that, I'd say jump on it because it's coming up here pretty quickly. I think, less than a month? Pretty close to it. Oh, and if you really want a treat, go to that camp. You might even meet Betsy. She says she's going to go there. I haven't been able to teach her how to hunt elk after all these years. She's going to learn from a real pro. Oh, here she is, digging me again. Anything else we have to do here, Bets? Oh, we got to tell everybody about a book. You've got to buy the book. If you want to know all about the 7mm and why I think they are the ultimate all-around caliber, whether you get a little one or a big one or something in between, like my beloved 7mm Remington Magnum, it's all right here. The history, where they came from, when, why there are so many duplicates. I mean, the 7rem mag appeared in its pretty much 7rem mag form several times before the 7rem mag popped up. Crazy stuff. And the other book we've got going here is a few more copies of Predator Hunting. If you're interested in hunting coyotes and bobcats and foxes and even bears and cougars, lots of information in there, including details on the various cartridges that I recommend. We do not include the latest and greatest new varmint cartridges because this book was published back in 2012, so things that popped up since then will not be covered. But the rest of the information I think is pretty valid. You can buy this book on Amazon. I think it's about $30 for this one and $25, $30 for the Predator book. Or if you want to spend a lot of money foolishly, you can order it through Ron Spomer Outdoors and get a signed copy. And it'll cost you way too much money, but that's the way the team set it up. So if you want an autographed copy for or dad or grandpa or your wife or your cousin or your mother's brother, sister's uncle, just send it in through Ron Spomer Outdoors store on our website, ronspomeroutdoors.com. Glad to have you, and I'll even say something wonderful on there like, hey, you're my favorite hunting party. Wish we could get together every year for this deer camp. Not that I've ever seen you before, but it might be fun. Okay. Yep, you know what that means. Question of the week, comment of the week. Betsy, who should we choose for our comment of the week? South Africa, yeah, I thought so too. The gentleman from South Africa who gave advice on what he learned over the years working with hunters, guiding and stuff, and loading the bullet, testing the bullet, zeroing your rifle, and sticking with that load and that bullet, and not going flip-flop willy-nilly like I did on my last African safari. I wasn't quite that bad, but it's a great point. Get something that works and don't switch in midstream. Select your bullet, select your load, shoot it through your rifle, get zeroed with the equipment you're going to be using on your hunt, and then use that on your hunt. Re-zero once you get to camp, but don't switch ammunition in between anywhere. You're going to have consistency. And consistency might be the hobgoblin of small minds, but by golly, it works out well for shooting and hunting. So thank you, gentleman from South Africa who did not want his name mentioned. We really appreciate that kind of assistance and real-world experience we can all benefit from. So until next time, I think we are pretty much done with this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors Podcast. I trust and hope you are all getting your equipment ready for the upcoming fall seasons. The heat of summer might not seem like an ideal time to be doing this, but you'll always be surprised how quickly the fall hunting seasons catch up on us. We'll see you next time. Hunt honest and shoot straight.